up in a second Deb Roy, and I met him years ago when he was the chief media scientist at Twitter, and he was looking at, he did really important research on the spread of false news online. So he studied the degradation of discourse online, and now he's doing really important, for a number of years, research at MIT about how to have constructive conversations in person. So I interviewed Deb earlier this year, and he said a number of things that really stood out for me. And among them was this idea that the all-team meeting, the town hall meeting that so many organizations, their reflex is to go to that when something is challenging, for a variety of reasons, we know actually doesn't work. And Deb and his fellow researchers at MIT are actually pioneering some alternatives to that, to actually have constructive communications even on the most difficult topics within organizations. So Deb heads the Center for Constructive Communication at MIT. He and his colleagues founded Cortico. It's a nonprofit that works with other organizations on tech-enhanced dialogue and listening, including for workplace settings. And I'm grateful that Deb has traveled from Boston today to share his insights on the work that they're doing. So thank you, Deb.
It's really a pleasure to be here and share a little bit about the work that we're doing across these two organizations. We call it C3 since it's a mouthful, the Center for Constructive Communication, and Cortico, which is closely affiliated. So I'm going to actually start with a bit of a dramatic 1-minute video, which our team put together to explain why we created the center, which was started about 4 years ago. And then I'll share some of the work that's coming out of it.
Technology, new era of communication, but set to full blast, always on, everywhere at once. It made public conversation faster, louder, and bigger, but also distorted, noisy, and harsh. It's no wonder that only the loudest voices dominate and divide, and trust is scarce. But what if we could build something new? Design a different future for how we connect, by weaving ancient wisdoms about human connection into a new generation of tools built for understanding, not overwhelming, for scaling, but only at the speed of trust. Technologies that turn up the values, not just the volume.
So a guiding belief behind our work is that hearing the humanity in others is necessary for democracy to function, for schools to function, for workplaces to function. And out of our studies in social media, one of the things we noticed is that when you give anyone the ability to pick up a bullhorn, some will effectively do that. And it has created a kind of repeated pattern of social fracture. And what's happening is, just because of the incentives of the platforms, the loudest voices, often the most extreme opinions that tend to be the most emotionally provocative, dominate. And these same patterns are now spilling into our in-person meeting places like town halls, where it seems like it might be a good idea to get everyone together and have an open mic. But again, the loudest voices take over. So a few years ago, going back around 2017, our team took a step back from analyzing social media, which is what we were doing at scale. And you asked this question, could we tap into what we started thinking about as ancient wisdoms of facilitated dialogue, of listening, of community organizing, and marry that with digital networks and modern AI to create something that could actually scale some of these ancient wisdoms and bring them to people where they're at. So if we go back to this picture of fracture, some of the ideas that we started building on were, rather than put everyone into a large space and just expect them to connect constructively, start with small groups and quiet spaces. We started learning about designing structured conversations where the art of the prompt, there's a lot of practices in dialogue practices, including, for example, a focus on sharing personal experiences or stories rather than opinions. These are facilitated conversations. When you have all these elements come together, people will share authentically. So we then started developing technologies to, in a variety of contexts, including in person, over Zoom, and through a custom app, have consent-based recordings of these small group conversations. And the reason for recording and then layering in other technologies was to go from small groups to a connected set of groups, to create a new form of network of small group dialogue. And once we have these recordings, one of the things that we started building tooling for was to be able to do a form of active listening where the participants of a conversation or others that get permission could go back to the recordings and make highlights, essentially find quotes or excerpts from these small group conversations. And so, for example, one way you can do this is with an app where you can find the transcript of a conversation you're in and just pick out the part that you thought is worth being heard by others beyond that conversation. If your voice was in that highlight, you'll get a consent notification to say it's okay for my voice to go further in that small group conversation. And then that highlight can be played back in another small group. We call this cross-pollination. So we just think about it. When you have groups that are not comfortable speaking authentically in a large setting, having these small groups and the technology creates a way to create that bridge. One of the ways we can let people hear one another's through the app or actually in person. If we then have an ability to scale these kinds of small group conversations, we developed a second set of tools and methods to be able to actually find patterns, themes that emerge across many conversations. And then those themes can be interpreted and shared back. So this is just kind of an example of one of the tools we've built, where if you scroll through here and we click on one of these boxes, that's a highlight. So there's both text and audio connected with that highlight. And along the right rail are some themes that have definitions. And there's an AI engine behind the tools that will actually give reasoning for why certain themes are recommended to be applied to highlights. And then you can go ahead and accept if you agree with the AI reasoning and apply. In this case, 6 themes are added to this highlight. So if you've ever been in a breakout group and you come back with Post-its of things that people shared in those groups, and then you go through an exercise of clustering them and say, what do we call this cluster? It's kind of like that, except the Post-its are actually pieces of speech that we can lift up from those small group conversations. And rather than just one label, in this case, there are 6 different labels. I don't even know what they say. Crime and policing, family support, poverty, people know what they need. These were community conversations from Durham, North Carolina. So once you have these patterns and you interpret them, we've also built consent-based mechanisms for sharing back with everyone who participated. That creates awareness of what's going on across the groups. And also, again, with consent to actually broaden the visibility and even make content public. And there are a variety of ways to share. We've created online voice repositories, kind of websites where you can go and listen to patterns of voice. We have this feedback loop through the personal app. We're developing ways to visualize connections across constellations of what are often personal stories that are being shared. I thought, since a lot of folks here are interested in how this could work in a workplace, one of the things we found in piloting in workplaces is just the sensitivities around identity and the potential for risk of sharing authentically in a workplace. So I just have a quick demo here. This is actually a sample of voice from a Boston neighborhood conversation, and I'll just play it first, a little sample.
I was in Seaport a couple of days ago, and I noticed how it looks nicer, it's fancier. You know, they're willing to do more over there for the people.
So we found that sometimes people want to share their story or what they've said in a small group, but they don't want it connected back to them. So we've created this interface and the underlying technology from one of our students to keep the expressiveness of the voice, but to change the identity. So as you see me kind of pulling across the slider, we'll see different voices.
I was at Seaport a couple of days ago, and I noticed how it looks nicer, it's fancier. You know, they're willing to do more over there for the people.
And then when I come like to Roxbury, Dorchester, you know.
And if you really want to take your identity out completely, then you go to a Gen AI synthesizer.
I was at Seaport a couple of days ago, and I noticed how it looks nicer, it's fancier. They're willing to do more over there for the people.
So we've been looking at the impact of listening to converted voice versus the Gen AI synthetic voice, and respect, empathy, trust towards the speaker is much higher when you keep the expressiveness of the original and yet take out the identity. So all of this creates a kind of infrastructure for connecting small group conversations and being able to have consent-based sharing of which parts of your speech you're actually willing to let others hear. When you put all that together, the concept that emerges is what we call a dialogue network. There are roles to be played by people. And so as we've started working with different organizations, we've developed training and certifications for how to facilitate this dialogue conversation, how to design these prompts, how to become a sense maker and find these patterns, going to use these AI-assisted tools to find the themes and interpret them, how to be a cross-pollinator and find the right context in which to actually share across different groups. So just to contrast with social media, which is what led to this new form of network, where every social media platform, TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook, starts with the solitary post. Create a piece of content and you post it onto your network. It's a solitary act. In contrast, in our approach, you start with talk in a small group, which self-regulates how people behave. You're much less likely to shout and put out those extreme opinions when you're in a small group and it's facilitated. That's the source of content that gets highlighted and circulates. Rather than a structure that is designed for viral broadcast spread, instead we have this consent architecture where voice moves at the speed of trust, and rather than focusing on what's trending in the moment, through this sense-making process, we can lift up patterns that resonate over time. So we kind of slow things down, lift up these things that rhyme. And so rather than the social media network, the idea really is to focus on dialogue as the kind of organizing pattern for a new form of network. I'll have to speed up because I see I only have 3 minutes. So I'll just kind of mention a couple of very quick examples. First example that we had an opportunity to put all this together was in Madison, Wisconsin, 2019. We helped the city with their search for a new police chief, going from hundreds of people in small group conversations, finding patterns about stories people shared related to public safety and policing. The prompt, I'll just give you a sense of how open-ended. What is a hope or concern you have about life in your community as you think ahead over the next couple of years? You know, a hope or a concern. And then what is a story that an experience you've had that relates to that hope or concern? So we have these open-ended conversations from which we actually found many experiences related to policing and public safety. Those are translated into interview questions that were used in publicly televised interviews with the final 4 candidates for police chief. This is a frame from one of those videos. So it created a more public and accountable process for what was actually a politically fraught search. Second quick example, Freeport, Maine. This is a public high school. After the murder of George Floyd, this high school introduced some new diversity and inclusion programs. There was student backlash. A lot of it was expressed as graffiti and slurs in the bathrooms. Ultimately, the principal, exasperated, locked down all the bathrooms except the 2 next to her office. And in that state of kind of complete communication breakdown between a group of student leaders and the administration, we were invited in. So we worked with a group of high school student leaders to learn how to use this approach. And they invited their peers into small group conversations. They lifted up the patterns and used that to get through this communication impasse. As I mentioned, there's 2 organizations here. So the research out of the MIT Center we have a unique cooperation agreement in place with Cortico, which is a 501c3 that has created a scalable set of tools and a team that supports partner organizations. And through that, we've now been able to work with over 200 organizations around the country. So we really have kind of developed these tools and methods, local governments, youth-centered organizations. So I'm going to just take just going to ask Kevin, can I take 2 more minutes to talk about? All right, okay. I know, I could just pretend that I don't see it either, but actually I'm kind of aware of the warning sign I'm getting here. So emerging areas include workplaces and universities. In fact, we piloted this approach of small group recorded conversations plus sense making and sharing now in 4 workplaces. A large communications firm that wanted to have conversations about AI and its effect on their business. We work with a small federal agency, actually a group of mediators that were having trouble coming to agreement around some change management issues, a university, and a small nonprofit. And I happen to work at both of the latter two. So the 2 examples I'll give you are from my own experience. The first, this is the Cortico team. That's a nonprofit, 29 people. The team wanted to articulate their shared values that shape their work. And so we actually used our own method. And over the past year, our head of operations and HR came up with some prompts. What is a value that we exercise in our work right now that means the most to you? Share a time you felt like our work at Cortico was aligned with your values. Share a time when it felt like it could be more aligned. These were all small group conversations. The team then made hundreds of highlights out of these conversations, used our AI sense-making approach to find patterns. And what I'm going to do is play for you a short medley of some voices from our team, just to give a sense of how we share back within our own organization some of the things that bubbled up. And they were actually sampling from 4 values that came up through these conversations.
We want to make sure that even though we're this diverse group of humans working all across the United States in every possible different time zone, that people feel like they belong.
We've done a lot of work for like setting things up so that things can be kinder. We all break stuff and we all fix it too. And it's really important to like feel like a person. So setting up a culture of kindness is crucial for making us be happy and healthy together so we can keep doing the things that we want to do.
Moments when there are like small groups of people from multiple different backgrounds, you know, bringing ideas to the table and like building them out. There's like a boldness. I think it's just like one of our strengths is like, we're willing to just say, yeah, let's go there. Like, let's try that out, you know, and be honest with ourselves if it doesn't work.
Creating avenues and opportunities for voices to be heard, I think is something that I haven't actually come across. I've never encountered something where the spotlight is actually fully on voices truly being heard and for the purpose of action afterwards.
I think that something about like kind of mass surveys and things like that, which dehumanizes folks, and the idea of Cortico being a platform that allows for conversations that are done by humans and actually bringing back that humanity.
I think in particular, deep listening, our platform is really built to support that. That's a real driver for me and makes me feel good about being part of this organization and makes me hopeful for the future.
Allowing communities to come to solutions or answers by themselves or through their connection rather than me trying to pretend that I have all the answers or that any one organization has those answers. I appreciate that what we offer is a way and a space for people to kind of sort these really difficult challenges out.
So we actually listened to these, looked at the sense-making patterns, and here you have one of our product managers, Harrison Speck, holding our cup that has the 4 values that came out of this process: power of listening, shared humanity, brave ideas, tech for good. And the cool thing is it's grounded in the voices and the conversations from the team itself. So we really feel like we kind of wrote these values together and we have this online voice repository that connects to it. So the other place that I work at is MIT. And last fall, after October 7th, our President Kornbluth, came to our team and said, is there a way we can actually take these tools and methods that we'd already been piloting, working with the Vice President of HR and some student groups and some academic departments we'd already been piloting. She said, can we go big and actually try to deploy some kind of an infrastructure and really put ourselves on a path to becoming what we started calling a listening campus. So the idea was to, what we launched just in August, we took the from social media, thought about putting listening at its core, and created this program called Real Talk at MIT. And the value proposition is to hear, to be able to listen to people beyond your own circle or networks. We're 25,000 students, staff, and faculty. That's the size of the organization. And to be heard by others without having to shout. And so this is a little clip I shot of about 75 student leaders learning some of the dialogue methods and tools. This is during orientation week. They then received a couple of hundred students during orientation week to introduce them to this method. And what we're now rolling out is this idea of a dialogue project where an organizer, it could be an administrator, it could be a HR staff leader, it could be a student leader that learns how to organize a dialogue project for a specific topic with an aim, either to elevate underheard voices and perspectives, to channel voice into recommendations for some kind of a decision-making process, or the hardest of the three, to mediate between two polarized groups, if both groups voluntarily come forward. All right, so we have AI tools that I'm not going to go into. We have been measuring impact of exposing people to hearing experiences rather than opinions. It really moves the needle on respect, trust, and empathy. And my last slide, which is when you look at what's happening at MIT, where we have decision makers and different enclaves in our community that right now feel disconnected, and there's actually in places very low trust and poor mutual understanding. We see this ability to create what we call a listening organization, where through these dialogue projects that we're now introducing in multiple different venues within campus, there are opportunities for people in the community to learn leadership skills, to be a facilitator, to be a sense maker, and engage in community building and deliberative processes, which we are starting to see can build empathy, respect, and trust, and build civic muscle. These skills that you learn don't just work within the context of a dialogue project, but they go beyond. And meanwhile, we have a lot of engagement now from decision makers at every level in our university to have unique opportunities in what we call demonstrable listening. Everyone knows what you're hearing, and you can demonstrate that you're listening and bring it into your decision-making processes. And we're setting up to look at whether we can measure impact on the perception of legitimacy and trust in those decision makers. Universities are perfect microcosm of society. We have 10,000 staff, 7 unions, residential communities and 13 dorms. There's newspapers, there's libraries, so it's really a place to figure out how to scale the approach. And that is what we're trying to do, building organizational health one conversation at a time. Thank you.